Hello, everyone. So we are coming back to Geneva, back to the room here in Ecumenical Center or World Council of Churches, and where UN High Commissioner Office of the Human Rights, as well in cooperation with the CECIPAN led by SEPS, together with Central Council and Ergo Network, FAJIC, Associatia Fast Forward is co-organizers of this event, also ERIAC and Dihna Bister initiative. So we are very glad to be here and to continue our conversation that started this morning about transitional justice and Roma. And we looked a bit into the past, into dark chapters of the past, and now we are moving towards the present and the legacies this past has is still carrying on today, and these dark phases of anti-Gypsyism are not over, and there are gross human rights violations and ongoing racism and discrimination that Romani people are and still encountering today around the globe. And this is precisely what our session will do. We will look at the human rights situation of Roma and the related groups worldwide, state of recognition of those dark chapters. And we'll also hopefully we'll look into how to address this anti-Gypsyism in the current phase, because it's not only issue of the past, it's issue of the present, and we very much see it's issue of human rights, rule of law, and also democratic accountability. And today with us on this delightful panel, we have one person, the key person, who is looking into minority rights globally and worldwide. So we have Mr. Fernando de Varenis, who is UN Special Rapporteur on Minority Issues. And he has this very important mandate, and we're very glad that he will be joining us today. And then we'll move to the panelists. Ambassador of Permanent Representation of Romania in Geneva, unfortunately, was sending his apologies, and he could not join us in person. However, we have with us still excellent panel and maybe even more time for discussion. So we have with us Mehmet Demaguler, who is Federal Government Commissioner against Anti-Gypsyism in Germany. Against anti-Gypsyism and for the life of the Sinti and Roma in Germany. So it's important that it's not only anti-Gypsyism, but also focus on the what's happening currently and today in Germany. From Germany and from this very important experience of setting up independent anti-Gypsyism commission, we'll shift to Natalia Tomenko, who is Romani activist from Ukraine and member of the area. And our colleagues Kemal Ural Taran, who is researcher and documentary photographer from Kiraya Kultur Dom Research Center, will join us just in a bit. And we hope... Are we in Romani translation?
Romani translation.
Sorry, something is happening. Juse, are you in the right channel? Okay, thank you. Okay, and also we'll have Ana Dalila Gomez joining online. She's a general coordinator of organizational process of Roma people in Colombia. So we'll have a bit of geographical coverage with us also. We'll have time for questions and answers. So again, housekeeping rules will be reintroduced. So we kindly request you to send your questions and answers via Q&A function. We saw that in the previous panel, we could not hear or ensure great videos or sound of our of participants joining online. Therefore, we invite you to use Q&A session, and we'll be very happy to raise your questions to the panelists, and you can even indicate to whom this question is addressed. We also remind you that we are web streamed live on TSEP's page or on Roma Memorialization, the event page, also on YouTube, also Romea in Czechia is also web streaming us. So we are very wide in the world, and maybe other partners too. So that we again call everyone to be respectful and keep within the time limits. So each of panelists will have 8 minutes, and we hope to have a really delightful discussion afterwards. So without further ado, we would like to give the floor to Fernande Varenes, who has been patiently waiting for us and joining us from Colombia, no?
Canada.
Canada, sorry. Okay, yeah, Dalila is from Colombia, from Canada at the moment, and it's 9 a.m. in Canada. Okay, and what's the situation then of Roma rights and related groups around the world? And we are hoping to hear your views and insights, and maybe some provocative also questions for the panel.
Many thanks, Lina. Distinguished colleagues and panelists, ladies and gentlemen, bonjour tout le monde. I'd like to start first, however, with very basic reason for the importance of memorialization. We've heard it, but I think it needs to be repeated, that those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And memorialization is necessary to avoid repeating past mistakes. Now, on the one hand, monuments and other physical sites of memory, they promise permanence of what and how we remember. But today, it's more than just plaques or monuments. It has to be part of life, part of history, education, and of our stories, and the stories of countries where states and Roma and Sinti live. And I'd like to emphasize a bit to begin on the issue of education and history, not only for children in schools, but more broadly, necessary to inform and form all of us, history and the way it's taught, but also ignorance, prejudices, and even racism and intolerance mean that stereotypes about marginalized groups, especially minorities such as the Roma and Sinti, can be reinforced and propagated amongst the majority if efforts are not continually, consistently, and persistently in place to combat these. Now, on the positive side, and I don't want only to be pessimistic, but a positive side, there has been in recent years a very significant increase in the countries paying attention to the dark legacies of the past, which have affected the Roma and Sinti, including on a regional or global basis, the European Roma Holocaust Memorial Day, the International Holocaust Commemoration Day, as well as some of you may know, I think now we have some 49 countries which have recognized the Roma genocide in Europe and the Americas. So as the concept note of this roundtable shows, there are numerous national initiatives to raise awareness and sensitivity, but also perhaps to redress in some ways the atrocities of the past, such as has recently happened in Czechia, which has adopted or put into place a compensation mechanism for victims of coercive sterilization, the overwhelming majority of whom are Romani women. And just to give another example, Norway, which has undertaken a truth and reconciliation process in relation to its treatment of Roma, but also Tatar minorities. Unfortunately, we're still at risk of not remembering the past sufficiently and of repeating it. Not exactly in the same way, not necessarily as brutally as in the past, because despite a positive momentum, some positive change, these steps that I mentioned, and which the concept note talks about also, seem very few when considering the scale of disinformation, vitriol, and discrimination against minorities around the world, but particularly Roma, Roma in Europe and in the Americas, although also in a few other parts of the world. Now, as others have pointed out, since 1989, there has been a renewal of active anti-Roma antipathy throughout the European continent and the Americas. Tens of thousands of Roma and others, minorities, regarded as gypsies, were ethnically cleansed from Kosovo, as we all know, in the period after 1999. There continues to be outbreaks of anti-Roma racism in every European and American society without exception. And as the concept note points out, in times of crisis, as we have been experiencing with COVID-19, and also in situations of armed conflicts, such as in Syria and Ukraine, prejudice and hate speech has increased, and Roma find themselves quite often doubly targeted and blamed in some cases, as some of you know, in some countries of Europe during the pandemic. And this is why the roundtable is so important. Around the world, we do not seem to have learned or even know of or understand the lessons of the past. And if this needed to be reminded, the Holocaust did not begin with gas chambers. It started with hate speech, especially hate speech against minorities such as Jews and Roma, who were considered, well, less deserving, not equal to white Europeans. And I mention that very specifically because that phenomenon is increasing right now across some parts of Europe and the Americas, often on the coattails of right-wing, extreme right-wing nationalism and conspiracy theories that white populations are being supplanted, replaced by colored non-Christian people. This is growing. This is a threat, and this needs to be tackled directly. I want to be absolutely clear here. Hate speech is rising around the world, and it's inciting violence and undermining social cohesion. Minorities, and especially Roma in some European countries and some parts of the Americas, Roma are a recurring target of hate speech. You have prejudices, you have racism, misinformation and disinformation that are being spread, propagated by social media, and we do not seem to be able to resist its tsunami of hate. But what we're seeing is that hate against Roma and other minorities are being used, instrumentalized to gain or to maintain economic or political power. And in this context, the Roma and other minorities are often scapegoats. They're the targets, they're blamed. They are the objects of prejudice and racism. And as I have warned on a number of occasions, intimidation and aggression directed at Roma minorities has risen alarmingly in recent years, and states must do more to prevent hate crimes and violence against them. Unfortunately, hatred, exclusion, and vilification of the Roma still persist today in many parts of the world. And I am very concerned, and I've expressed this in a number of press releases in recent years, I'm very concerned at the alarming rise of intimidation, aggression, and violence against Roma minorities, including scapegoating and, as I said, hate speech through social media. And quite clearly, by the way, and I think many of you know this, racial bias and discrimination has resurfaced this year during the COVID pandemic with false rumors against Roma minorities. And I think we need to be honest here. There's still a phenomenon of dehumanization and denigration of the Roma that has led to violence in the past, which should not be allowed to continue today, but it is happening in different ways, in different guises, especially as forms of hate speech against the Roma on the internet and social media. So having commemorative days and other acts of memory are important and necessary, but in my view, they are not enough and not sufficient if Roma communities are not given access to clean water and sanitary services, where Roma can be chased out, beaten, and in some cases even killed. And we have situations, we have cases where the state authorities are not prosecuting those who are responsible. And we've raised a couple of cases involving Roma and violence and even murder of Roma, where government officials actually were not prosecuting these matters. So we have situations where laws against incitement to hate and violence are not enforced, or when Roma fear those that are supposed to protect them, the police, and avoid them because of this rise in intolerance that is becoming, in fact, part of majoritarian populism in some countries. Minorities, including the Roma, are more likely to be stateless. In fact, 3/4 of the world's stateless people are from minority communities. Roma and other minorities are more likely to be the ones excluded from access to equal education. They are more likely to not have equal access to medical care and to be the target of incitement to violence. And in fact, in most countries where we have reliable disaggregated data, it's clear that 3/4 or more of hate speech target minorities, not only Roma, but minorities are the main target of hate speech in social media. Some of it is subtle, much is not, with politicians instrumentalizing prejudice and stereotypes against minorities, against Roma, for their own political gains. Just a few days ago, some of you may have seen that in Italy, there was one far-right politician who posted a video on social media saying, "Vote for us to never see her again." And he was standing next to a Roma woman. That illustrates a phenomenon which is in fact not slowing down and needs to be tackled directly. Memorialization should not only be words, it requires action, concrete action on the ground so that Roma can live as equal members of society without fear and stigmatization. It means comprehensive anti-discrimination measures, as well as legislative and policy initiatives to protect and promote the human rights of Roma minorities, their identity, languages, and their rich culture and history. So states also need to increase public knowledge about the Roma Holocaust, recommit to tackle the racism and discrimination that are still too prevalent, and particularly to designate an official day of remembrance in those countries where Roma were victims of the Holocaust. Finally, as was pointed out in a 2020 study by the Council of Europe on the representation of Roma in European curricula and textbook, all states should review and update their textbooks along the line proposed in a recommendation of the Council of Europe's Committee of Ministers on the inclusion of the history of Roma and/or travelers in school curricula and teaching materials. The challenges are still enormous. The context, not the most favorable, but there is no doubt that what you'll be discussing is extremely important and absolutely necessary to ensure that the human rights of the Roma are equally acknowledged and protected, not only in terms of memorials, but in terms of action on the ground and equality for all. Merci, voilà, köszönöm, nice.
Thank you so much. We have heard important your message that should the past not be remembered and memorialized, it's doomed to be repeated. So therefore, and it is unfortunately, example you mentioned from Italy is very much looking as something that we saw in 30s or in the past. So it's very important, this your call of caution and the current realities that we see. And we have with us today, and I hope you'll come back also to your mandate and what we can do differently in order to avoid this past of being repeated. And I think we have a very good example in Germany and what has been done or the work that recently started by the Anti-Gypsyism Independent Commission that is being set up and also having a special mandate of federal government establishing the special commissioner mandate on anti-Gypsyism, which is carried by Mr. Mehmet Daymaguler. And we would like to hear from you. What are your efforts in not repeating the past, and what are your suggestions also a bit looking to the present and forward?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for having me. No, I'm in office since May, and one of my first trips brought me to Ukraine and to Auschwitz. We talked about memory, we talked about past and how important it is, you know, to
yeah, there you go.
You know, how important it is to have this kind of memorials and memory. However, I have a slight, problem with, the concept of past and memory in general. I have a problem with that. And the problem is, you can't deal with atrocities like the genocide and act in a way that this is entirely something apart from us. It's over, it's far away. I don't think this would be an accurate approach. William Faulkner once said, past never really dies. It's not even past, and which is very true. So when I have this memorials, especially this kind of government initiated, government produced memorial, it feels always a little odd for me, to be honest. It feels sometimes even hypocritical, because we claim to, honor the dead. We are talking about what happened to people 70, 80 years ago. The same way we are honoring these people, we're dishonoring the living. And when it comes to Germany, the genocide was recognized as a genocide only in 1982, 37 years after the war. And it's only 2 years ago that for the very first time, a German president apologized for what we have done to our fellow citizens. It was in 2020. And the genocide was not really never dealt with. It was not part of the curricula. I went for 13 years to school in Germany and never heard of this genocide in school. It was not really in an honest way dealt with, but it also was built. Was built on a lie. The memory was built on a lie, because after the war in 1945, when the first persecution ended, the second persecution started. And this second persecution didn't end in the gas chambers, but it ended in making Sinti and Roma not only second-class citizens in Germany, but in many cases, not citizens at all. So we have had cases of survivors coming from the camps back to Germany, to their homes, to their ancestral homes, places they have been living in for centuries. And all of a sudden, German authorities denied giving German passports, German papers to the survivors. And still today, there are people living without a German passport or without German documentation in the third or fourth generation. So we do have a memorial in Berlin, which is a very impressive memorial. We do have August 2nd and everything. But what do we have in reality in every day? So now we can start fighting the racism of Nazis. But you know what? The racism within police forces, who are not Nazis necessarily. Yeah? In many cases, they are not Nazis. We have to deal with that because this soundtrack which led to Auschwitz, the soundtrack of the villainization of Sinti and Roma as criminals. This soundtrack, it's still going on. Why? Because after 45, the murderers, the criminals were allowed to dictate the narrative. And the narrative was, we can't be villains. We are police officers. We have done just our job. These are the villains, and it's kind of, in their genetics. And today we don't speak about genetics. We do speak about culture. So the villainization is going on, and we have a huge debate in Germany about, the so-called clan criminality, which is, in my opinion, a kind of, dog whistling. We do know what we're talking about. We do not what you mean. So my fight against anti-Gypsyism do not start on the streets. It starts in office chambers and in courts. We need to talk about, the dark side of the moon, the dark side of our democracy. So what are we gonna do? First of all, if you are a drug addict, the first step to recover is, to admit that you have a problem. And we do have a problem. We do have a problem to accept our fellow citizens as fellow citizens. I mean, this is a very basic thing to say, but that's the way it is. And how do we get there? We need a truth commission which deserves its name. I'm not talking about calling 5 or 6 historians and ask them to write a report and come back to me in 2 years or 3 years. This is not the thing. The emphasis must be on the process. And the process is a multi-dimensional process. We do have, on a federal level, ministries who need to have a deep look into the mirror. We do have on a state level. And state level is extremely important in Germany when it comes to not only to this topic, but especially this topic, because the whole judiciary is a state topic. The whole legal system, schools, kindergartens, the state topic. So we need to have the discussions there. And also on a municipal level. And we need this process in a way which really hurts. We need the pain. We as officials need to have a sense of the pain people are feeling every day. And it's our responsibility to face this pain. The process of the Truth Commission needs to be driven by the community. And this is the second thing we need to talk about. Even people who are really in Germany open for ideas, ways to make things better, often follow a kind of a paternalistic approach. And this needs to end now. And the last point is, I was in Ukraine a couple of weeks ago, and I've met a number of Holocaust survivors. And the story I have heard over and over again was, before the war in 1941, we had a little farm here or a little business there in the south or in the east. And then when the Germans came, they killed all of us, they destroyed our homes, and all the only people who survived went underground, right? And after the war, we had nothing. So the officials, the new officials, sent us to the north, to the east, to the west. And these people arrived there without the communities. The communities were dead, the communities who protected the people. And they came into an environment, in a new environment, which was hostile. And this process of arriving in this area, of developing roots, of finding home, is still going on, because 40, 50, 60 years are nothing. We're talking about 1 or 2 generations. And it made it clear for me as a German how vivid, how actual the past is.
Mehmet, on this note, I would interrupt you. We can come back because we actually you made my job very easy, because you started to speak about Ukraine and the people and suffering that was there from the past related to Holocaust that is continuing into the present and future. And we actually have with us Natalia Tomenko, who is a Romani activist from Ukraine, and she is also a member of ERIAC, and I think she wants also to share with us her experiences. So I think
it's brilliant. That's why I started talking about Ukraine, to have a swift change. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you very much, and I'm sure you will have a lot of questions also to Mehmet on how this work in Germany translated into something more tangible, and also to follow up on this your idea of building a Truth and Reconciliation Commission and true process that is multidimensional and embedded in European values and constitutional values. But we pass over to Natalia. Natalia, the floor is yours. You have 8 minutes, and you'll speak in English, or you can, if you want, you can address us in Romani, or we have our translators, by the way, Romani and Spanish translators today with us. So
thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be here today. And I would like, first of all, make some connections between past and present. And being a coordinator of history and commemoration at the ERIAC gives me opportunity actually to be engaged into historical context of the human rights of Roma communities in Europe. And ERIAC is paying special attention to commemoration and remembrance of the Roma Holocaust and education about the history of Roma community in Europe. And from the 11th century, when Roma people arrived to Europe, we already can see the manifestations of anti-Gypsyism when communities were marginalized, discriminated, and lived in poverty. But the situation since Middle Ages changed in a way that we don't see anymore Roma women being burned, accused in sorcery, but still we have deeply rooted anti-Gypsyism presented on individual and institutional levels everywhere, even in the most progressive countries, unfortunately. I have been monitoring the situation of hate speech online and offline in Ukraine since 2020, while being engaged in a project of Roma defenders at the European Roma Rights Center, the aim of which was to support the principles work of defending the human rights of Romani people across Europe and fighting against digital anti-Gypsyism. Within the project, I could see how the hate speech actually can be the base for future hate crimes. And referring to the situation in Ukraine before the full-scale Russian invasion, I can refer that it was not different from other European countries in where discrimination and hate speech is presented. Since the war started, my team, the Agency of Advocacy Roma Culture, ARCA, has been paying special attention to the situation of Roma inside of Ukraine and abroad as well. So we found significant human rights and humanitarian impact on the civilian population. And I'm dividing two subtopics, what's happening inside of the country and outside. And being an organization inside of the country, we actually have a close connection to the communities, and we understand the internal issues maybe which is not always visible for our abroad partners. So what we can see, what's happening inside of the country, that Roma communities from the east and central part of Ukraine were persuaded to become IDPs. They lost usual opportunities of income, of course, and some of them lost housing. Roma are being denied in getting humanitarian aid due to the presence of anti-Gypsyism. And Roma children and youth cannot have a proper access to education. Not everyone has possibility to join online education nowadays. The situation will be close to humanitarian catastrophe in winter due to the lack of heating system on the east, south, and some central part of Ukraine that has been destroyed recently. There is a prediction of the second wave of immigration of Roma communities to the west of the Ukraine and to the neighboring countries this fall already. What we can see happening abroad, thank you for our partners who are sharing in their reports a lot of important points, but what we can see that the Roma asylums face with discrimination on basis of their ethnic origin. They are perceived as second-class population on the borders and in neighboring countries. In some cases, Roma families are denied in assistance, housing, education, and health services. There was a short-term solution found due to the solidarity and help of the extended European Roma NGOs, but the proper solution has to be found in the long term to make it more sufficient, and should be done from the side of authorities. And there is a big number of Roma asylums who are getting back to Ukraine. It's a huge problem that we are facing nowadays. And actually the main reason why people are going back, because they are facing a lot of anti-Gypsyism in hosting countries. And I believe that complex work should be done here in order to eliminate this discrimination that is present on all the levels and to make Roma people from Ukraine feel somehow welcomed in the European Union. And in addition, I would like to draw the special attention to the Roma youth, both those who remained in country and those who fled abroad. Roma young people have a hard time in asserting their rights and affirming their identity and belonging. Other problems faced by Roma communities are reflected in young Roma's transition to adulthood, namely poverty and lack of opportunities within the outside the community, as well as difficulties in assessing their human rights. The situation puts a specific group of Roma young people at even more serious disadvantaged position due to the intersectional discrimination. The situation of Roma youth movement is in decline because youngsters need to take care of their basic needs first and foremost right now. And I believe that the best long-term investment of the UN can be to develop specific programs for Roma youth with use of those the new intellectual cohort would be raised. As a researcher, I also can see that there are a lot of topics about Roma being published, Roma as victims of the world crisis. And this narrative is being spread a lot, less than positive stories about Roma. That's why projects as Roma Heroes, established by ERIAC, is being very successful to show the hidden side of the discourse that can cause in long-term recognition of the participation of the Roma community into the civic movements and will help for better integration. Nowadays, in the circumstances of the war in Ukraine, there is a great opportunity to see how Roma communities defend their rights to live in a democratic state while serving in the Ukrainian army and volunteering. Roma in Ukraine are proud to be part of the fight for the victory, not only of Ukraine as a state, but for the victory of democracy, freedom, and human rights around the world. In order to make the stories of those Roma activists and individuals to be heard, ARCA established the informational platform recently, Janes, in where publishing unique content to educate the European society about real people and what they are doing to be free nowadays. And shortly to sum up, I would like to outline that the war in Ukraine nowadays allows us to look back and assume that the world had not learned the lessons of the past, unfortunately. And at the same time, the war shows that people of different nationalities and ethnicities united. This year, we will host a digital ceremony, a commemorational ceremony of the commemorating the Roma victims of the Babin Yar in Ukraine, in order to remember and commemorate the memory of our ancestors and to show the existed solidarity in Europe within the Roma civic movement, and to attract the attention of international audience to the current human rights violations within the war in Ukraine, trying to prevent the possible horrific consequences. During the ceremony, besides of the Roma genocide survivors' participation, we will have a youth component, which is essential, in my opinion, because of the transgenerational dialogue. And like my own messages, that the Roma youth, that the driving force behind the progress. And this actually shows it's like a great case study now to see how human rights towards Roma actually being violated, yeah.
Thank you so much, Natalie, for your insights and sharing us the dark chapters of the present. And I mean, and we see how deadly and horrific is anti-Gypsyism, especially at the times when society gets tested, when all of our values get tested. Thank you so much also for working on those solutions, on those heroes, and creating this another narrative that it's so, or counter narrative that it's so important. And we again call participants and people watching us online to pose your questions also to Natalie, should you would like to learn more about their projects or the situation in Ukraine. And with this, I will move to Kemal Vural Tarlan, who just came, who joined the panel. And as I mentioned, he's a researcher, but not only, he's also a documentary photographer, and we see how it's important to preserve those memories and to keep those faces of those people or those stories alive. And he represents Kirayak Kultur Dom Research Center, if I pronounced it correctly. Okay, Kemal is smiling. And so you will tell us a little bit more about the situation in Turkey and Syria, as I understood.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for your invitation for this important meeting. My name is Kemal Vural Tarlan. I am human rights defenders. Mainly Turkey and Middle East. I working in Middle East country also. Today I want to talk about the Middle East Gypsy community, Dom community, from the Second World War to the Arab Spring. What is the change of Middle East Dom community during the war, and I think it is very important for memorization of Roma or Gypsy community, because of I and my organization want would like open the Middle East door to memorization of Roma or Gypsy community, because of, many people don't know about the Middle East Roma community, and in the Middle East country, nearly 5 million Roma now living all the Middle East country. I want to talk about 3 countries in the Middle East. 3 countries, the one of Palestinian, another Iraq, and another Syria. Roma and Dom community, they are living in the Middle East country, especially Egypt, Palestinian, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Turkey, and Lebanon, and the other Gulf country. There are 2 groups in the Middle East, 2 Gypsies group, the one of Dom, the others Abdal. Abdal is a subgroup of Roma community or Gypsy community. They are living with, mainly living with Turkmen group, with Turkish community. Dom community, especially living with Kurdish, and their second language is a Kurdish. But now, for example, at the Egypt, nearly 2.5 million Roma living in the Egypt. The Middle East peoples in their language called Gypsies, Navar, Dom, Kurbet, Abdal, Halebi, Kaoli, Zot. It is like a generic names of these communities. Firstly, I want to talk about Jerusalem and Palestinian Dom. Historically, Dom community lived in the Jerusalem. Now, today, a big community, Dom community living in the Jerusalem. They have a community centers. They are working about the education of children and cultural heritage of Dom community. Prolonged conflict between Israel and Palestine laid the groundwork for dispersion of Dom through to the other Middle East. If you go to the Middle East country, you can meet with thousands and thousands Palestinian family, Dom family. For example, last week I was in Lebanon. I visit Bekaa Valley and I visit Jordan Valley. I met many Palestinian peoples. They are mainly, they are don't have a citizenship. They are statelessness, and their life very, very difficult in this country. They are like an invisible community. Their children don't go to the schools. Mainly, they are beggars. If you go to the Beirut, you can meet with this family in the streets, mainly women and children. We don't know about that. Only we are talking about the Roma community, the Western country. It is for us. It is very important. If you go to the refugee camp at the Egypt, Syria, Jordan, you can meet with Syrian, Palestinian Dom family also. The other community, the other thing, other country, Iraq. Iraqian peoples called Dom is a Gajar. Gajar is a very big community in the Iraq. I think it is their population nearly 70,000. The experience of Gajar Dom community in the Baghdad after the United States occupied Iraq in 2003. is only a small example of what they have suffered and can shed light upon these times. All big city and all cities has a gypsy neighborhoods. For example, if you go to the Istanbul, Sulukule is a main neighborhood of Roma community. If you go to the Aleppo, Haydariye is a main Dom neighborhoods. And in Baghdad, you remember Abu Ghraib. It is important for USA soldiers. No, historically, Abu Ghraib is a Qajar neighborhood. After the war, after the occupy of United States, the new manager of city of new regime attacked these neighborhoods, and they killed many Dom because of they say they are not enough Muslims. New Islamic groups and Shia groups says they are not they use alcohol, they drink alcohol, and they sells alcohol in our city, and also they are not enough Muslims, and they says we don't want gypsy in our country. Okay. Yes. And after, if you go to the other Middle East country, for example, Jordan, you can meet with Qajar families. Also now, for example, in Gaziantep, in my country and my cities, we met many Iraqian Qajar family because of before the war, they came to Syria and across the border. Now they are living in the Turkey. Yeah, I have a problem with times. But yes, Syrian inside war. After the Syrian inside war in many Dom community, I think nearly 100,000 Dom across the border for neighboring countries. We are prepare many reports on this community. We work with European Commissions. We prepare. We are work at the Jordan, Lebanon, and Turkey about the social cohesion of this community. Now in our country, they are gypsy, they are refugee, and they are gypsy also. They discriminated. I think I don't have time. I have many reports about that. After the meeting, we can take. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Kamal. And definitely your reports would be very useful for this outcome document that we'll be preparing after the conference. And the same goes for Natalie's work inside and outside violent conflicts and war times and civil conflicts, and where the anti-Gypsyism can get even more evil or darker face. And okay, so we have covered Europe, Ukraine, Central Eastern Europe, and then even Middle East. And now we actually shift to Latin America. And I wonder if Ana Dalila Gomez is already, I see, among the panelists. Ana will speak in Spanish, as I know. So please make sure to change your settings into English translation. And again, Ana Dalila is General Coordinator of the Organizational process of Roma people of Colombia. So we are we would very much be delighted to hear from you of the situation in Colombia, and also what are you doing to recognize and address this anti-Gypsyism, and maybe you have also some lessons from Latin America on what we could do better also in other regions, as you, and also as UN Special Rapporteur on minorities with us is here, so we can really get together those lessons. So Anna, the floor is yours and 8 minutes are yours also. Thank you.
Okay, Naisara Satumenge, Moje Roma, Jaute da Duma and Españolitsko, Tesai Pajuven and Englishisco. Nais Tumenge te en Bastale. Bueno, voy a hacer una presentación. Voy a compartir. Primero de todo, pues, un saludo a Fernández Barenes, nuestro amigo, a Alain Miklos y a todos ustedes. Voy a hacer una presentación muy rápida acerca de lo que es el contexto colombiano y prácticamente latinoamericano, que tiene que ver con el conflicto armado en Colombia y cómo afectó al pueblo gitano. La Comisión de la Verdad, que es una instancia en donde se esclarecen los hechos de las víctimas del conflicto armado, trae un capítulo para el pueblo Hom, que se llama Resistir no es aguantar, y voy a hablar sobre eso. Pero antes de ello, quiero hacer un contexto y mostrarle a ustedes. En Colombia creo que somos el único país que tenemos un avance en temas de marco de derechos. Hemos utilizado el convenio 169 de la OIT porque Colombia lo ratifica, la constitución política también, y de ahí hemos adelantado varias normas y varias leyes para el pueblo gitano, para el pueblo Hom. Por ejemplo, la ley 1381 de 2010, que es de lenguas nativas, en donde está la Shihomaí. Decreto 2957, que es importante, que refiere solamente al pueblo gitano. El decreto ley 4634, que es para la asistencia, reparación integral y restitución de tierras del pueblo Hom. Y en Bogotá hemos hecho un avance importante en el marco de los derechos. También hemos participado en 2 censos generales de población, que creo que es el único país del mundo en donde los Hom estamos incluidos en los censos. En el 2015, en el 2005, disculpen, tuvimos 4.000, casi 5.000 personas que se autorreconocieron como Hom, y en el 2018 bajamos al 51%, al casi 50%, 2.649 personas, en donde el 51.5 son hombres y el 48.5 son mujeres. Bueno, todos estos mecanismos han servido para visibilizarnos en Colombia y en Latinoamérica. Nosotros hemos visto que hemos podido hacer todo un bagaje de visibilización en cuanto a la cosmovisión, la identidad, la cultura, el tema de territorio, justicia propia, que es la Crijomaí, el buen vivir, los procesos organizativos, todo lo que tiene que ver con los derechos, la consulta previa, libre e informada, y las acciones afirmativas en el marco del enfoque diferencial. Aquí hemos aplicado el tema de acciones afirmativas porque la misma Constitución dice que aquellos pueblos, aquellos grupos que han sido excluidos históricamente, discriminados, requieren unas acciones afirmativas para nivelar la ley y para nivelar todo lo que corresponde a esos derechos de los cuales se ha hecho negado. Bueno, voy a hablar acá, bueno, las características étnico-culturales voy a pasarlas porque ya todos sabemos quiénes somos, tenemos una lengua propia, tenemos una justicia propia, hemos sufrido la persecución desde el año 1000 cuando salimos de la India, la Segunda Guerra Mundial, la época colonial, todo esto. Nosotros aquí nos llamamos, donde estamos, somos la Cumpaña de Bogotá, hay 10 cumpañas y 2 organizaciones. También hemos cambiado la forma de itinerar, ahora es diferente. Nosotros tenemos una serie de elementos que nos distinguen de la sociedad mayoritaria. La Crijomaí es nuestro valor importante. Y bueno, voy a pasar básicamente a lo que se refiere a resistir no es aguantar, que es como nos ha afectado el conflicto armado a nosotros. Dice, el conflicto armado nos afectó mucho, nos obligaron a dejar las carpas y a vivir en casas, salir a comerciar. Ya no podemos salir a vender nuestras mercancías tradicionales, ya no podíamos. Tocó vender carros, tocó vender joyas y nuestra vida itinerante se redujo. Después de esos años hubo un desplazamiento hacia Ecuador, Venezuela y en algunos casos a México. Así fue como nos hicieron migrar del país, una forma de desplazamiento que nos dio muy duro, nos hizo desplazarnos invisiblemente. Entonces, se abordan las violencias y daños padecidos por miembros del pueblo Hom. Se tienen en cuenta los siguientes hallazgos en el marco del conflicto armado: persecución cultural, asesinatos, desaparición forzada, amenazas, secuestros, tortura, agresiones a la libertad e integridad sexual, despojos, pérdidas de bienes, desplazamiento forzado y exilio. Las diferentes modalidades de violencia cometidas contra los miembros del pueblo Hom causaron daños desproporcionados que afectaron nuestras vidas y prácticas culturales y contribuyeron al riesgo de nuestro exterminio físico y cultural. Las diferentes violencias padecidas por los miembros del pueblo Hom han reducido nuestra población en Colombia y ha causado procesos de migración a otros países en calidad de refugiados o migrantes ilegales, un permanente exilio. Sabemos que pues nosotros el desplazamiento de exilio del pueblo Hom desde el siglo X de nuestra era hemos huido de las guerras, de los conflictos, violencias y persecuciones históricas hasta llegar a Colombia en diversas épocas y ejercer la itinerancia por la geografía nacional. Desde la Guajira hasta el Amazonas, Nariño, desde el Chocó hasta Arauca y Cúcuta. A causa del conflicto armado, sin embargo, el pueblo Hom se ha visto obligado al confinamiento en zonas urbanas y a itinerar entre pocos departamentos. Entonces, vemos que este pueblo ha trasegado, ha tenido violencia en décadas, en Colombia más de 60 años, incluso antes, porque cuando se llegó en la época de la colonia, pues ya habían ciertas presiones y ciertas discriminaciones y afectaciones. Bueno, nosotros podemos ver que en Colombia los grupos armados ejercieron diversos hechos de violencia contra los miembros del pueblo Hom. En declaraciones ante la Unidad para la Atención y la Reparación Integral a las Víctimas, que se llama UARIF, se dice que hubo homicidios, 7 homicidios acreditados, porque los gitanos o los Hom sabemos que nosotros casi nunca vamos a denunciar ante la justicia ordinaria, porque no conocemos de esa justicia ordinaria que es ajena a nuestros usos y costumbres. Entonces, también podemos acá ver que todos estos datos que yo les estoy dando son referenciados porque se ha hecho una investigación con la Justicia Especial para la Paz, que es un mecanismo que se hizo para Colombia en el marco de ir consiguiendo la paz del conflicto armado, la Comisión del Esclarecimiento de la Verdad y el Grupo de Análisis de Datos en Derechos Humanos, HRDAG, por sus siglas en inglés. Entonces, todas estas violaciones, desde el año 1985 al 2018, alrededor de 198 víctimas de homicidio en el pueblo Hom. De 1990 y 2017, alrededor de 8 víctimas de reclutamiento forzado. De 1985 en 1990, 2018. Hay unos que hablan de 10.421 víctimas de 19, de los cuales 702 son ROM acreditadas en el registro único de víctimas. Entonces, ¿me están escuchando? ¿Sí? ¿Me escuchan? Bueno, entonces,
maybe we can also start concluding and
okay.
Also internet started breaking, so maybe, yeah.
Ok. Entonces, ¿qué podemos decir? Que los gitanos, los Hom, sufrimos ataques a la vida, a la identidad cultural e instituciones políticos sociales. Hemos sufrido violaciones de derechos humanos e infracciones al derecho internacional humanitario. Amenazas. Hemos sufrido también violencia contra las mujeres Rom, la Romnia. Hemos sufrido otro tipo de reclutamiento con niños menores de edad. Hemos sufrido también despojo. Hemos sufrido desplazamiento forzado y también hemos tenido muchas personas en el exilio. En este sentido, yo quiero llamar la atención a todos los Hom, a todas las instancias de Naciones Unidas, para que también se fije una política importante que tenga que ver con todos estos elementos de sufrimiento a gitanos de Latinoamérica y de Colombia, que permita también que podamos entrar a la universidad, que haya políticas públicas en salud, en educación. Todos estos elementos son importantes para que de alguna manera se pueda reparar todo ese sufrimiento que nosotros hemos sido las víctimas preferidas. Entonces, lo que se quiere es precisamente que estos eventos no se queden solamente en venir a exponer todo lo que nos ha dolido, sino que seamos propositivos para avanzar en mejorar los niveles de vida de nuestro pueblo en donde estemos. En Colombia, en Europa, en América, en donde estemos, porque no aguantamos la discriminación, la exclusión, el marginamiento de lo que hemos sometido durante siglos. Resistir no es aguantar. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ana Dalila Gomez, for your excellent presentation and for your last message, which I think brings us all, brings this panel back together. Okay, we heard about those situations around the globe and all this suffering, but how, as you said, how to turn it into resistance and how to turn it that those transitional justice processes are also, as Mehmet has called, not only working for those who suffered in the past, but for those who are living now, that they are actually embedded in delivery of equality, human rights, and rule of law. So with this, we are kicking off our questions, and I am looking around and I see at least, okay, 2, 3, okay, 5 questions. Okay, the debate is heating up besides starting. Okay, so I will start. You raised the...
I don't have a question. I just want to bring back into play the one that was left from last time.
Okay.
And I would do it first because I know that Ismail and Soraya started to react. So I just want to do justice to the lingering question that was on the screen, which I'll read. I guess I'll read from Martin Kovacs. Those of us who have followed the politicization of Roma for many years will sympathize with Soraya's frustration at the impact of numerous conferences, meetings, reports, etc., declaring solidarity and determination to tackle anti-Gypsyism. It seems today we are largely talking about what can be termed elite actions in terms of knowledge education, e.g. research, school texts, public information, or administrative or legal actions, e.g. officials for Roma issues, reparations, legal challenges, etc. How does this fit into the real world we are living in, the most notable feature of which is historically unprecedented recognition of Roma, coincidentally with structural post-communist impoverishment and exclusion, along with nationalist fragmentation? He then goes on, as I noted at the end, to say, could the participants be explicit about what approach they are applying to their advocacy of memorialization reconciliation activities? Do they see any risk that such initiatives might deepen social divisions in Central and Eastern Europe? If so, how can such risks be mitigated? I just put that out because it was left over.
Yeah.
And I know that there are views, so it was, saw body language in response.
Okay, let's collect few more comments or questions, and then we can actually move back to the panelists and see to whom they could be posed. Can someone help me with this? Okay, thank you. I have interesting. Please be quick and concise so our panelists can still have time. Thank you very much. Can me and Damiani speak in Spanish, and we can put the translator here, translation, but side by side, not at the same time. Okay. Bueno, voy a hablar en español. Disculpame. Tengo una pregunta para Dalila y quería agradecer mucho su participación porque cuando me llegó la información de que en la más reciente ley de memoria, verdad y justicia en Colombia se agregó las cuestiones de minorías, eso para nosotros fue una felicidad inmensa, incluso comentábamos con el grupo organizador del evento y quería saber cómo está el proceso ya fue aprobado la ley hasta donde sé, y cómo está el proceso de poner en práctica. Si hay reuniones con las minorías, con los romaníes principalmente, y si hay una apertura, y también ¿qué esperas, por ejemplo, de organismos internacionales para saber cómo los organismos internacionales y otras organizaciones pueden ayudar con este proceso? Tengo un comentario. Yes.
¿Listo? Bueno, primero que todo, estamos muy contentos porque se va a avanzar en el Ministerio de la Igualdad. En ese sentido, va a haber mucha participación de todos los pueblos étnicos y de otras poblaciones, como el tema de discapacidad, el tema LGBTIQ+, el tema de campesinos, el tema, bueno, vamos a estar prácticamente todas las poblaciones. Vemos con mucho agrado este gobierno progresista que de alguna manera da pie para poder hacer una inversión social.
Can we get a translation of the question first? And then let's come back, we'll take a collection of questions, and then the panelists can respond, rather than it have a translation of your question.
Okay. ¿Sí? ¿Me escuchas?
No, it's okay. Just translate.
¿Aló? ¿Me escuchan? Bueno, ¿sí? ¿Aló? ¿Aló? ¿Me escuchas? ¿Me escuchas? Bueno, estaba tratando de explicar. ¿Me escuchan? ¿Me escuchan? ¿Alain? ¿Aló? ¿Me escuchan? ¿Sí?
Sí.
Ok. Bueno, trataba de explicar.
Hang on, Dalila.
Okay.
Can we do what we said and take a row of questions, and then we'll come back to the panelists?
Yeah, because we'll come back to.
Entonces, trataba de explicar de que en Colombia.
Hang on, Dalila. We'll come back to the panelists in a minute. We'll take a row, and then we'll come back to the panelists. Questions. So, yes.
Okay. There are more questions now coming up, but actually, yeah, it was.
I want
Damian.
to talk.
Damian, it was.
Another question. I want to talk for 15.
Okay. So actually, maybe if it's intervention rather than question, maybe we let person to Dalila to answer, and then we continue.
Let's not have a dialogue. There are more questions. The questions are posed.
But it's an intervention. Okay, Claude, I am moderator of this session. Okay, so Dalila, can you be very, very concise in answering your question, and then we get intervention from Damian, and afterwards we have, I have on my note that Ismail was raising her hand, Soraya was raising her hand, also Gwendolyn was raising her hand, and Yunus also. Okay, so I have collected those hands, but let's try to be interactive. Okay, but very shortly, Dalila, if you can just summarize quickly. Go ahead.
¿Respondo a la pregunta de Alain?
Sí.
Bueno, entonces nosotros vemos con mucha positivismo el hecho de que haya un gobierno nuevo progresista en donde se vaya a crear un ministerio para la igualdad, en donde tenemos la participación de todas las pueblos, poblaciones, grupos étnicos. Es muy importante para nosotros que estemos reconocidos como tal y poder ya llegar en ese marco de derechos que yo les comentaba antes. Esto es muy importante porque se va a crear una instancia precisamente para aquellos que hemos sido llamados los nadies. Los nadies somos aquellos que no hemos tenido esas oportunidades de poder llegar a estos niveles para poder decir, aquí estamos, el pueblo home, que necesitamos que los derechos se cumplan, se garanticen en esa medida de que somos un pueblo diferente. Entonces, para nosotros es supremamente importante que entremos con voz propia, con nombre propio, teniendo en cuenta todas las afectaciones, tanto del conflicto como de discriminación, como de aislamiento, segregación, de lo que hemos sido víctimas durante toda la historia también en este país, en el continente. Entonces, pues nos parece algo supremamente importante que demos avance en ese sentido y que yo creo que somos un paradigma para el mundo en donde hemos tomado esa constitución para volver la Carta de Derechos a favor del pueblo home.
Okay, thank you so much. And microphone is with the Damian. So Damian, but please be concise.
Ok. ¿Me pueden traducir en español? Sí. Sí. Perfecto. En este caso quería hablar del eje que está en cuestión y quería aprovechar que está el señor Mehmet Damager. Le quería preguntar y aparte quería proponer, creo que en este caso los estados nos tienen que reconocer, hablando del holocausto, en el mundo entero. Y creo que es muy importante que salga desde Alemania, que fue en parte el problema de origen, el seguimiento de nuestra diáspora mundial sobre este problema. Creo que también se debería ver cómo resarcir a las víctimas, principalmente a los que sufrieron el holocausto, por el robo de sus riquezas y por el reconocimiento de derechos. Creo que ahí radica el principio de la verdad, la memoria y la justicia. En reconocer el daño que hicieron, en hacer el seguimiento a los países que fue la diáspora y sus familias, resarcirlos de alguna forma, instar a los gobiernos que ayudaron a los nazis a escapar. En mi caso, Argentina alojó una infinidad de jerarcas nazis. Creo que el Estado argentino debería pedir perdón y creo que el que tendría que tomar la acción y la iniciativa es el Estado alemán, aprovechando que está el señor aquí. Solo eso.
Bueno, no sé si pueda intervenir, pero me sumo a lo que dice Damián y además de ello, toda esa reparación que tiene que verse también traducida en la inversión social.
Sorry, Dalida, there was a question and we need to translate it, and yeah, we need to translate the question, and the question is to Mr. Mehmet Demaguler. Sorry for this. Okay, interpreters, please go ahead, translate the question, and then we turn to Mr. Mehmet to answer it.
I agree.
Okay, we have further questions from Ismail and from Soraya. Okay, can you pass? And afterwards, Gwendolyn, and
Yeah, let's go.
So thank you. So I have first a question for Mehmet. It's about the methodology for the Truth Commission in Germany. Which cases you want to highlight? What period? How many institutions? Now the role of media, because I think public narrative is very important. And lastly, what are the resources of information that you are going to use? And then linking the next two interventions by Natalie and Kemal about war times and post-conflict times. Do you have any methodology to collect data of the role of the minorities and especially the Roma in those contexts, in the Ukraine war, but also in the Syria-Iraq war? I remember that we discovered Yazidis as an ethnic religious minority in the war against ISIS, but we didn't hear anything about the Roma or the Dom living in those areas. And last question is about the refugees. What do we know about the human trafficking, especially women, children in the case of Ukraine or other war? And how can we collaborate in this case? I want to address Claude with the UN Refugee Agency, yeah, because we have to be able to put the concrete groups that are affected by the war, not only nationalities, but also minorities. Thank you.
Yes, I don't know if I do really have a question, but I have an intervention then, yeah? Because I wanted to react on the question if a truth and reconciliation process would upset the people, the majority more than before. I don't know if they can get more upset because their action today is showing that they seems to be very frustrated and about Roma because, I mean, we are not closely being a second-class citizens. And I am also very sick and tired of a very paternalistic way of thinking. I am fed up with that. We are capable. We have people surrounding us who are devoted to the work to make a better living for Roma, a better living for all the citizens in Europe. So I don't think we need that kind of discussion any longer. I mean, I passed that barrier for a long time ago, and I would hope that more of us have done that. And especially people who are working on Roma issues in institutions. I have to be very clear on that. I respect every thought, minds. No question is stupid because there are always answers to them. But I hope also that we will have mutual respect for the history of Roma and what a huge impact it has of our life today. I mean, I am a proud Roma woman, and I would love to be a proud European woman also. I cannot, because my Europe is a failure. The values of the European Union is blah, blah, is hypocrite. It's nice on paper, yeah? And as I said in the interview, we have produced so many papers, we can run a whole intifada with all the papers. This conference, this event today, I think we are clever enough, all of us here, to find outcomes that will bring us further in this work. And I think we have passed the one that we are afraid. I am sick and tired to be afraid of institutions, civil servants, and all these people, really. And if they don't fit in their position, I think they should leave. Clear as that. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think the questions were addressed at the moment to, again, Mehmet about methodologies and how also this risk not to make them into checkbooks exercises or yeah.
Yes. Ismail, you raised a very, very important question. I think the methodology and the framework to define this is very, very important. You might know that we had the independent commission anti-veganism. And, when I received this report for the first time, I was a little shocked. I mean, it's 900, almost 900 pages of fine print. But I haven't read in my whole life a single report which was worth every single word. And this report, they suggested when it comes to our past, first, a real recognition of the genocide, and secondly, to investigate the second persecution after 1945. I think both topics belong together, they are interlinked. So what I'm going to do is, we are going to make a very first, not draft, but a collection of aspects which should be part of this commission. But then in a very, very, very early stage, we are going to reach out to the community. Because, the community knows better than we do what happened, when happened, where happened. And everywhere something happened, it needs to be investigated. And it's really a broad range of institutions and topics. Let me just pick one or two. Of course, obviously, we need to investigate the role of police forces on a federal level, but also on a state level. But we also need to talk about scientific institutions. We have had a number of universities very much in collaboration with Nazi institutions, trying to identify, the genome of Roma people and their link to criminality. And many of these professors and many of these institutions just went on working on the same projects after the war with a new label. So I do believe that if we really want to achieve something like a catharsis, a real catharsis, we need to go to the places with the most pain. It does sound a little prosaic, but it's not. It's not. It's a really a very hurtful way. And the question is, how can the community be the definer, the driver of the process? What kind of qualifications do we need, for example, for broadcast interviews? All this stuff. And I rather take a month or 2 months more instead of rushing. And Soraya, with the thing with to upset people more, upsetting people, it's very necessary, because the opposite of upsetting is not something like we are listening to the problem and then no, the opposite is ignorance.
Yes.
And we have this kind of well-defined ignorance, which is very, very comfortable for the people who are not in pain, but for the people who are causing pain. So actually, I was a lawyer for the past 10, 15 years, and I did upset a lot of people. And I'm very proud of that, because I think we need to rock the boat in order to make the boat better. And again, the most important source for me to design and establish this kind of commission is the community. The community knows better, and this is the way it is. And when you ask me for resources and everything, obviously and honestly, I have very limited resources. But you know what? In a few weeks' time, maybe in a few months' time, we are going to have a concept, and this concept is going to have a price. And then, the German federal government has to answer the question whether or not, the reconciliation with not only with our own past, but with our present, how much is it worth? Yes. And if it's not worth, it's going to be a message in itself, I think. And I'm really, really interested in learning from you guys with Truth Commission and with your experiences in other countries, in other contexts. So thank you very much for this input, indeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And I think in a subsequent question, we will dig even deeper into those models and methods. But the question was also posed to you about methodologies. And would you like to add or share something, or how you reach out to those communities and make sure it's co-owned process?
Yeah, sure. There is no set up methodology yet. Of course, it's an ongoing process when we are creating how to actually collect the stories, the testimonies, what's happening now. But what actually helps us a lot, that's the lesson from past. Like after the Second World War, till now, we are still trying to prove that Roma community was a part of that movement. Actually, there were people who were participating in the war. But actually the war is happening now, and we are trying already now to show, not in decades. It gives a lot of risk to do it now as well, but we understand that it can give benefits in a long term. So we are collecting, besides of the youngster stories, also stories of Roma genocide survivors who already faced with this horror in past, and who nowadays also hiding in the same basements. So it's like double trauma, which should be studied, and that's a unique time now because there's people already. So we started in July to give some financial help, also with Central Council help to these survivors, and already 2 of them passed away. So like people are gone, really, like we have to do it immediately now.
Can I ask, because I forgot when I had the word, because this war now, and the actually discrimination towards Roma in Ukraine, I don't mean the member countries now. We were, as an activist, we tried to focus on it because I know when I was a lot to the Council of Europe many years ago, the Ukraine Roma activists explained for us different kind of pogroms, etc. But now, during the war, we were not allowed to mention the discrimination in Ukraine because it would give a favor for the Putin because he was saying, all this. So, but I'm happy because there have been some documentation on it, but not spread. Is it still like that? It is still like that. Okay, because I do respect that. But the picture is also like, it's like heaven in Ukraine, except for the war, for the Roma,
European Roma Rights Center is making reports out of this.
Okay, good.
Okay, and I'll pass to Mehmet, and then we come back to Gwendolyn and Julius. Okay. Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah, unfortunately, we don't really vote for memorization of memorization studies for post-conflict because of in our country and in Middle East, our community needs very emergency and urgent urgent support. Because for our community now very poor with support for they access the system, they access the right, and they access the service. Last year we start work with Education Ministry and for education of children. We work with some academics and now we start another thing. We are now working with youth of community and maybe at the future we will work in these issues.
Okay, so now Gwendoline and Julius. Very delicate.
Yes. So thank you. I'll be very brief. I just wanted to thank Ms. Tomenko very much for being here and to express that those of us in the Czech Republic and civil society were extraordinarily shocked by how the anti-Gypsyism in that culture surfaced in the refugee reception process there. Romani refugees have been subjected to discrimination and much, much worse treatment than, in such stark contrast to the outpouring of love for the non-Roma white Ukrainians who've been fleeing to the Czech Republic. And I think this is something that's shocking and needs to be documented everywhere. I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention that the contact point for Roma and Sinti at the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, convened an international Roma contact group at the end of May. And civil society gave a lot of input from all over Europe about what Romani refugees from Ukraine are facing at the present moment in different countries and in different circumstances. They compiled a long list of recommendations to also the UN and other bodies, and I believe the Romea.cz website published it. So we should keep going with the civil society real-time capturing of also the abuses that are happening now to Romani refugees from Ukraine. That's all I wanted to say. Can you push to that?
Thank you. I'd like to share some reflections here, but also have a question for Ahmet Daima-Güler regarding anti-Gypsyism in Germany. Now, for a number of years, I am teaching courses on Roma at different universities, including in Germany. And I was, on the one hand, impressed by the evolution, for example, in the past 10 years, how much knowledge is produced at the initiative of Roma activists, scholars, and NGOs, but remains basically marginal. And in my experience, I always try to look at our friends and colleagues from the Jewish studies. And I remember that in Germany, in this respect, was a country that surprised me. On the one hand, the type of research and the discourse on anti-Gypsyism in Germany, really advanced in comparison to other European countries. On the other hand, also the experience of Germany in promoting Jewish studies. I remember here in 1852, a Jewish scholar, Leopold Sunz, wrote a piece an article, an important one that shaped the future of the Jewish studies in Germany. When he made a direct link between the promotion of Jewish studies and the emancipation of the Jewish people. And for us, those that are working in Romani studies, that was a very good model how Germany promoted in its own universities Jewish studies, yeah, as a way to emancipate Jewish people. Now I'm asking you, though I know your mandate is limited, as you said, yeah, how do you see the future of institutionalizing Romani studies and bringing that knowledge produced by Roma scholars and NGOs into academia, yeah, and bring together these actors, yeah, the community and the universities by your mandate? To me, that's something that it can be done in Germany, and will just follow what happened with the Jewish studies. So there is already a model to follow. The problem is how much political will is also present there to have it.
Okay, for how long you didn't had, okay, maybe it got muted. So Mehmet heard the question, so just we can quickly wrap up.
Maybe can you summarize the question for the online? Can you just summarize the questions very briefly, Lina?
Repeat the question only.
Who did, where, from when did it mute? All of Ismail's question.
It was more common for your use.
Okay, Mehmet, respond.
Thank you very much. You know, we do have some research being done in the University of Heidelberg, for example. But I do realize we do not have enough research. And I do see in particular a need of more research when it comes to links to legal studies, to social studies, economic studies. You can't, in my opinion, you can't isolate the topic from what's going on outside the university. We do have, and this is a good thing, a growing number of people from the community with a scientific background. We do have a group of people who can drive research. I do believe that on the one side, this group can drive this reconciliation and truth efforts. On the other side, I think at the end of such a process can be a clear identified broad need for an institutionalized research, not only ad hoc research, which happened quite often in the past. A special challenge in this context is the federal nature of Germany. We do have 16 states, and universities and research, most of the research centers are driven by, are in responsibility and driven by the state. So we do need a lot of work to convince and to coordinate this effort in this, this context. Therefore, one of the most important suggestions of the independent commission was to establish an ongoing an office for coordination between federal and state efforts. But again, I think comparing our field of work with the work of with its called topics of Jewish studies and the fight against anti-Semitism, you know, my office was designed in a way in which the German Commission of against anti-Semitism was a role model. So it's, the design is very, very similar. However, this is something I'm repeating time and again. The point which we are starting are much, much lower than where my colleagues started 4 or 5, 6 years ago. You know, just to give you an example, we have to fight against people who are denying the Holocaust, right? But you know, when it comes to Sinti and Roma in Germany, I don't have the problem with people denying the genocide. I have a problem with people who are knowing of the genocide and thinking this was the right move to do because it was a fight against, you know, and you understand what I'm trying to say. So yeah, we can compare it, but we definitely have to identify differences. So, and when it comes, my last point, to research and studies, I think we need a much larger European-wide collaboration between universities when it comes to that, because, you know, we have a university dealing with this question in UK, one in France, 2 in Italy. You get the gist. And because there's only a limited number of research institutions, we actually need much more collaboration between these institutions, right?
Thank you so much. We are really getting in deeper or the core of the issue and how to make this transitional justice work. And this will be our subsequent session. But just before concluding, I would like to ask Dalila if she would like to have very brief last word. Are you still there, Dalila?
I think your microphone is put out.
Yeah. Okay, maybe. ¿Quieres hablar, Dalila?
Ana Dalila.
Okay.
Okay, sí.
Un pequeño momento.
No,
por favor.
Bueno.
Sin videos.
Dalila, sí, es que no te estamos viendo. No sé si tu cámara está apagada. Ahora sí, por favor, si querés hacer los comentarios.
Vídeo, porque así funciona mejor la conexión.
Okay.
O sea, apaga el vídeo, Ana. Dalila, apaga el vídeo, que se
Sí.
es mejor.
No, he estado mirando, escuchando con atención todo lo que se ha venido explicando en este panel. Y creo que es importante considerar.
Translators can translate already.
Okay. I start. Bueno, Entonces, venía diciendo que es importante considerar el pasado, lo que nos está pasando y lo que puede venir. En ese sentido, pues yo creo que también es necesario hacer una solicitud a las Naciones Unidas, a todas las entidades, de mirar políticas públicas en cada uno de los países de manera que permitan mejorar las condiciones de vida y también mirar esos temas de la reparación en relación a lo que ha venido sucediendo con los gitanos a nivel en el mundo, ¿sí? Nosotros estamos disgregados por todo el mundo y me parece importante mirar, por ejemplo, que hay países, por ejemplo, en Europa, el tema de que nacen niños gitanos en los países y no son reconocidos como tales. Ese es un primer derecho que se tiene como ser humano, tener esa ciudadanía, esa nacionalidad. En Colombia también tenemos personas que nacen y que no hacen todo el trámite para ser ciudadanos, pero acá se reconocen, ¿sí? O sea, se reconocen como colombianos, Roma colombianos. Entonces, nos parece importante que una de las primeras cosas es reconocer a esos que nacen en los diferentes países como ciudadanos de esos países, porque tenemos una condición étnica, pero también somos ciudadanos y no debemos ser ciudadanos de segunda ni de tercera categoría. Tenemos esos mismos derechos que los demás ciudadanos. Y en ese sentido, lo que se pide acá es precisamente crear, formular, implementar políticas públicas que vayan en el mejoramiento de las condiciones de vida del pueblo en todos esos países y en particularmente donde existe tanta discriminación y tanta exclusión y pobreza. Porque la pobreza no solamente se da en términos de tener economía, plata, dinero, sino se da en términos de ir erosionando nuestros elementos identitarios, nuestra cultura, nuestro idioma, nuestros valores. Entonces, creo que lo más importante es también mirar ese enfoque diferencial y esa aplicación de acciones afirmativas para que no nos sentamos excluidos dentro de sociedades gají, o sea, no gitanas, y donde nosotros podamos también aportarle a la construcción de procesos de ciudadanía desde una óptica diferente. Gracias.
Thank you so much, Dalila. And this actually excellently summed up the interventions. So what happens to Roma and how anti-Gypsyism resurfaces during the times of crisis and violent conflict, how Roma are not protected as citizens or as refugees or even IDPs or holders of certain status, even when they qualify for that status, and also how this intersectionality plays out, as has been mentioned by several of you, the generational issue and gender issue and others. So thank you so much. And we have a lot more to think about methodologies on how we reestablish the truth. And this is next panel. Now we have a brief break of, actually, we still keep 15 minutes, but then we ask for patience and understanding from our online audience. Bear with us, and especially our interpreters. Thank you so much for your excellent work. And we are coming back then at 4:30 set Central European time, so Geneva time. Thank you so much, and we'll be back at 4:30.
4:20, 4:20. 15 minutes is
4:20. 4:20, apologies, 4:20.